look at Shizuku's reviews, bringing you a southern perspective on books, movies, music, and much, much more. Stick around for a while, you just might hear something wicked. Hello again, friends, and welcome to episode 21, and that's a Monday read for everyone. So, we're going to jump right into it, and we'll get right back to our 1001 things everyone should know about science. And we left off last time about how animals are put together. And we're starting at fact 32. Every animal is the sum of its organ systems. The cells that exist in your body and the body of any animal are not scattered at random. They are arranged in organs, like the stomach and heart. And the organs are themselves arranged into organ systems, like the digestive and circulatory systems. The composite of these systems make up the complete animal. Digestive systems. 33. The digestive system converts food to materials the cells can use. Animals take in food, either plant material or meat. The food is passed into the digestive system, usually a hollow tube that runs through the body, where the large molecules are broken down into smaller molecules by the actions of enzymes and then absorbed into the animal's body. The organs that accomplish this task make up the digestive system. 34. In humans, digestion starts in the mouth. When you chew your food, you are starting the digestive process by breaking it up into small pieces. Your mother was right about chewing. Meanwhile, an enzyme in the saliva starts to break down starch. 35. Human digestion continues in the stomach and intestines. In the stomach, hydrochloric acid kills microorganisms and helps to produce an enzyme, pepsin, that starts to break down proteins. In the small intestines, enzymes made in the intestine wall, the liver, and the pancreas carry out the major task of breaking down carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and nucleic acids. The products of this breakdown are absorbed through the walls of the small intestine. In the large intestine, water is taken from the digestive foods before it is excreted. 36. Many symbiotic bacteria live in the human large intestine. The most famous of these is Escherichia coli, E. coli for short. A large part of our knowledge of molecular biology comes from experiments done on strains of this bacterium grown in the laboratory. 37. Cows ruminate while chewing their cud. Like many animals, the cow has nothing in its digestive tract to allow it to digest cellulose directly. Instead, chewed up grass goes into a chamber in front of the true stomach called the rumen, where resident microorganisms start to break the food down. While this process is going on, the cow periodically brings material back up to be chewed. In the end, the digested grass, now in the form of fatty acids, and the microorganisms pass through a true stomach and are digested. 38. Cows aren't really vegetarians. Grass isn't a good source of protein, so the cow gets double duty from its microorganisms. First, they break down the grass. Then, this job completed, they make the ultimate sacrifice and are themselves digested by the downstream part of the cow's stomach. Isn't that interesting? And that is it on digestive systems. And next time we will continue with sensory systems. And our next read will be the first inaugural address of James Madison. This speech was given on March 4th, 1809. Unwilling to depart from examples of the most revered authority, I avail myself of the occasion now presented to express the profound impression made on me by the call of my country to the station of duties of which I am about to pledge myself by the most solemn of sanctions. So distinguished a mark of confidence proceeding from deliberate and tranquil suffrage of a free and virtuous nation would under any circumstances have commanded my gratitude and devotion, as well as filled me with an awful sense of the trust to be assumed. Under the various circumstances which I give particular solemnity to the existing period, I feel that both the honor and the responsibility allotted to me are inexpressibly enhanced. The present situation of the world is indeed without a peril, and that our own country, full of difficulties, the pressure of these, too, is the more severely felt because they have fallen upon us at a moment when the national prosperity being at a height not before attained, the contrast resulting from the change has been rendered the more striking. Under the benign influence of our republican institutions and the maintenance of peace with all nations, while so many of them were engaged in bloody and wasteful wars, the fruits of a just policy were enjoyed in an unrivaled growth of our faculties and resources. Proofs of this were seen in the improvements of agriculture, in the successful enterprises of commerce, in the progress of manufacturers and useful arts, in the increase of the public revenue, and the use made of it in reducing the public debt, and in the valuable works and establishments everywhere multiplying over the face of our land. It is a precious reflection that the transition from this prosperous condition of our country to the scene which has for some time been distressing us is not changeable on any unwarrantable views, nor, as I trust, on any involuntary errors in the public councils, indulging no passions which trespass on the rights or the repose of other nations. It has been the true glory of the United States to cultivate peace by observing justice, and to entitle themselves to the respect of the nations at war by fulfilling their neutral obligations with the most scrupulous impartiality. If there be candor in the world, the truth of these assertions will not be questioned. Prosperity, at least, will do justice to them. This unexceptionable course could not avail against the injustice and violence of the belligerent powers in their rage against each other, or impelled by more direct motives. Principles of retaliation have been introduced equally contrary to the universal reason and acknowledged law. How long their arbitrary edicts will be continued in spite of the demonstrations that not even a pretext for them has been given by the United States, and of the fair and liberal attempt to induce a revocation of them, cannot be anticipated, assuring myself that under every vicissitude, the determined spirit and united counsels of the nations will be safeguards to its honor and its essential interests. I repaired to the post assigned me with no other discouragement than what springs from my own inadequacy to its high duties. If I do not sink under the weight of this deep conviction, it is because I find some support in a consciousness of the purposes and a confidence in the principles which I bring with me into this arduous service. To cherish peace and friendly intercourse with all nations having correspondent dispositions, to maintain sincere neutrality toward the belligerent nations, to prefer in all cases amicable discussion and reasonable accommodation of differences to a decision of them by an appeal to arms, to exclude foreign intrigues and foreign partialities, so degrading to all countries and so baneful to free ones, to foster a spirit of independence, too just to invade the rights of others, too proud to surrender our own, too liberal to indulge unworthy prejudices ourselves, and too elevated not to look down upon them in others, to hold the union of the states as the basis of their peace and happiness, to support the Constitution, which is the cement of the Union, as well as its limitations as in its authorities, to respect the rights and authorities reserved to the states and to the people as equally incorporated with and essential to the success of the general system, to avoid the slightest interference with the right of conscience or the functions of religion, so wisely exempted from civil jurisdiction, to preserve in their full energy the other salutary provisions in behalf of private and personal rights, and of the freedom of the press, to observe economy in public expenditures, to liberate the public resources by an honorable discharge of the public debts, to keep within the requisite limits a standing military force, always remembering that an armed and trained militia is the firmest bulwark of the republics, that without standing armies their liberty can never be in danger, nor with large ones safe, to promote by authorized means improvements friendly to agriculture, to manufacturers, and to external as well as internal commerce, to favor in like manner the advancement of science and the diffusion of information as the best ailment to true liberty, to carry on the benevolent plans which have been so meritoriously applied to the conversion of our aboriginal neighbors from the degradation and wretchedness of savage life to a participation of the improvements of which the human mind and manners are susceptible in a civilized state. As far as sentiments and intentions such as these can aid the fulfillment of my duty, they will be a resource which cannot fail me. It is my good fortune, moreover, to have the path in which I am to tread lighted by examples of illustrious services successfully rendered in the most trying difficulties by those who have marched before me. Of those of my immediate predecessor, it might least become me here to speak. I may, however, be pardoned for not suppressing the sympathy with which my heart is full in the rich reward he enjoys in the benedictions of a beloved country, gratefully bestowed, or exalted talents zealously devoted through a long career to the advancement of its highest interests and happiness. But the source to which I look, or the aids which alone can supply my deficiencies, is in the well-tried intelligence and virtue of my fellow citizens, and in the counsels of those representing them in the other departments associated in the care of the national interests. In these my confidence will under every difficulty be best placed, next to that which we have all been encouraged to feel in the guardianship and guidance of the Almighty Being, whose power regulates the destiny of nations, whose blessings have been so conspicuously dispensed to the rising republic, and to whom we are bound to address our devout gratitude for the past, as well as our fervent supplications and best hopes for the future. And that was James Madison's first inaugural address, and we will continue with his second inaugural address the next time. So, speeding right on through to The Art of Love and other love books of Ovid, we shall continue quickly with Elegy number 7. He curses himself for having maltreated his mistress. Load my guilty hands with fetters, if thou be my friend. Now that my anger has departed, rage it was, look you, that made me raise my rash hand against my mistress. O madman that I was, to think that it was my hand that made her weep. At that moment I would have struck my father and mother, nay, I would have rained blows upon the gods themselves. But say, did not Ajax, armed with his sevenfold shield, slaughter the flocks that he seized in the broad meads? And the ill-fated Orestes, who in his mother wrought vengeance on his father, did he not take arms against the dark sisters? And could I of all men, dishevel her ranged tresses? And did this mar my mistress's beauty? Not so. She only looked the lovelier, in such guise as they say the daughter of Scolonius, armed with her bow, pursued the beasts on the Mount Nalus. In such a plight did Adriane mourn when she beheld the swift south winds bearing away both the sails and the promises of her perjured Theseus. Thus too, O chaste Minerva, but for the sacred fillets that bound her head, Cassandra had laid upon thy temple's floor. Who would not have called me a madman? Who would not have called me a barbarian? But never a word said she. Her tongue was paralyzed with fear. Howbeit, I read the mute reproach upon her face, and though she spake not, her tears were my accusers. Oh, why did not my arms fall from my shoulders? It had been better had I lost a limb. 'Tis against myself that my violence hath turned, and my vigor hath been the instrument of my own torture. Wherefore do I need you more, ye ministers of crime and slaughter? Avaunt, ye sacrilegious hands, and with the fetters ye deserve be laden. Why had I struck the humblest Roman? I should have had to answer for it. Have I, then, more right to strike my mistress? The son of Tydeus left a hideous memorial of his wickedness. He was the first to raise his hand against a goddess. I am the second. And withal, his sin was not so black as mine. I struck the woman whom I said I loved, but did not wreak his fury on a foe. Now, mighty conqueror, go and prepare thy triumph. Set the victor's laurel crown upon thy brows, and on thy knees give thanks to Jove. And let the vast throng that grace thy chariot shout aloud, Io triumph! And let thy poor victim fare sadly before thee, her hair unbraided, pale from her head to foot, but for the bruises on her cheeks. Better it had been left upon her lips the imprint of my own, better that her neck would bear the traces of my loving teeth. Then, even though I was as violent as a mountain torrent, even if I was beneath the sway of blind rage, was it not enough to shout at the poor girl without roaring out a torrent of horrible threats and tearing her dress from her neck to girdle? 'Twas there my violence stopped. Nay, so hardened was my heart that I dragged her along by the hair, and in my barbarous rage I left the mark of my nails upon her dainty cheek. There she stood distraught, her face as white as Parian marble. I beheld her death-like look, and her limbs trembling like a poplar leaf stirred by the sighing wind, like the slender reed which bends beneath the zephyr's breath, like the wave whose surface is ruffled by the warm south wind. Her tears, long restrained, coursed down her face as the water floweth from the melting snows. 'Twas I again to feel the blackness of my guilt. Those tears of hers, what were they but my blood? Thrice I essayed to fling myself a suppliant at her knees. Thrice she thrust away my dreaded hands. Lay on, I cried, and spare not, vengeance will alleviate thy pain. Tear my face with thy nails, spare not mine eyes, no, nor my hair. Let rage lend strength to thy hands, weak though they be, or at least to obliterate the sad traces of my crime. Braid once more the tresses that my hand so cruelly dishevelled. So obviously that lover's tiff did not go very well from him being barred the previous eulogy or elegy. So even in ancient Roman times, it was not acceptable for a man to lay hands upon a woman. And anyone who lays hands upon a woman without just cause is, as this man was, quite guilty. But I'm going to take a short break, and I will see you right on the next side. And welcome back. And now we will continue with our Scottish fairy tale of the week. And this story is called The Seal Catcher and the Merman. Once upon a time, there was a man who lived not very far from John O'Groat's house, which, as everyone knows, is in the very north of Scotland. He lived in a little cottage by the seashore and made his living by catching seals and selling their fur, which is very valuable. He earned a good deal of money in this way, for these creatures used to come out of the sea in large numbers and lie on the rocks near his house basking in the sunshine, so that it was not difficult to creep up behind them and kill them. Some of those seals were larger than others, and the country people used to call them rowan, and whispered that they were not seals at all, but mermen and merwomen, who came from a country of their own, far under the ocean, who assumed this strange disguise in order that they might pass through the water and come up to breathe the air of the earth of ours. But the seal catcher only laughed at them and said that those seals were most worth killing, for their skins were so big that he got an extra price for them. Now it chanced one day that he was pursuing his calling, that he stabbed a seal with his hunting knife, and whether the stroke had not been sure enough or not, I cannot say, but with a loud cry of pain, the creature slipped off the rock and into the sea, and disappeared under the water, carrying the knife along with it. The seal catcher, much annoyed at his clumsiness, and also at the loss of his knife, went home to dinner in a very downcast frame of mind. On his way, he met a horseman who was so tall and so strange-looking, and who rode on such a gigantic horse, that he stopped and looked at him in astonishment, wondering who he was and from what country he came. The stranger stopped also and asked him his trade, and on hearing that he was a seal catcher, he immediately ordered a great number of seal skins. The seal catcher was delighted, for such an order meant a large sum of money to him. But his face fell when the horseman added that it was absolutely necessary that the skins should be delivered that evening. "I cannot do it," he said in a disappointed voice, "for the seals will not come back to the rocks again until tomorrow morning." "I can take you to a place where there are any number of seals," answered the stranger, "if you will mount behind me on my horse and come with me." The seal catcher agreed to this, and climbed up behind the rider, who shook his bridle rein, and off the great horse galloped at such a pace that he had much ado to keep his seat. On and on they went, flying like the wind, until at last they came to the edge of a huge precipice, the face of which went sheer down to the sea. Here the mysterious horseman pulled up his steed with a jerk. "Get off now," he said shortly. The seal catcher did as he was bid, and when he found himself safe on the ground, he peeped cautiously over the edge of the cliff to see if there were any seals lying on the rocks below. To his astonishment, he saw no rocks, only the blue sea, which came right up to the foot of the cliff. "Where are the seals that you spoke of?" he asked anxiously, wishing that he had never set out on such a rash adventure. "You will see presently," answered the stranger, who was attending to his horse's bridle. The seal catcher was now thoroughly frightened, for he felt sure that some evil was about to befall him, and in such a lonely place he knew that it would be useless to cry out for help. And it seemed as if his fears would prove only too true, for the next moment the stranger's hand was laid upon his shoulder, and he felt himself being hurled bodily over the cliff, and then he fell with a splash into the sea. He thought that his last hour had come, and he wondered how anyone could work such a deed of wrong upon an innocent man. But to his astonishment, he found that some change must have passed over him, for instead of being choked by the water, he could breathe quite easily, and he and his companion, who was still close at his side, seemed to be sinking as quickly down through the sea as they had flown through the air. Down and down they went, nobody knows how far, till at last they came to a huge arched door, which appeared to be made of pink coral studded over the cockerel shells. It opened of its own accord, and when they entered they found themselves in a huge hall, the walls of which were formed of mother of pearl, and the floor of which was of sea sand, smooth and firm and yellow. The hall was crowded with occupants, but they were seals, not men, and when the seal catcher turned to his companion to ask him what it all meant, he was aghast to find that he, too, had assumed the form of a seal. He was still more aghast when he caught sight of himself in a large mirror that hung on the wall, and saw that he also no longer bore the likeness of a man, but was transformed into a nice, hairy, brown seal. "Ah, woe to me," he said to himself, "for no fault of mine own this artful stranger hath laid some baneful charm upon me, and in this awful guise will I remain for the rest of my natural life." At first, none of the huge creatures spoke to him. For some reason or other, they seemed to be very sad, and moved gently about the hall, talking quietly and mournfully to one another, or lay sadly upon the sandy floor, wiping big tears from their eyes with soft furry fins. But presently they began to notice him, and to whisper to one another, and presently his guide moved away from him and disappeared through the door at the end of the hall. When he returned, he held a huge knife in his hand. "Didst thou ever see this before?" he asked, holding it out to the unfortunate seal catcher, who, to his horror, recognized his own hunting knife, with which he had struck the seal in the morning. and which had been carried off by the wounded animal. At the sight of it, he fell upon his face and begged for mercy, for he at once came to the conclusion that the inhabitants of the cavern, enraged at the harm which had been wrought upon their comrade, had, in some magic way, contrived to capture him, and to bring him down to their subterranean abode in order to wreak their vengeance upon him by killing him. But instead of doing so, they crowded round him, rubbing their soft noses against his fur to show their sympathy, and implored him not to put himself about, for no harm would befall him, and they would love him all their lives long, if he would only do what they asked him. "Tell me what it is," said the seal catcher, "and I will do it, if it lies within my power." "Follow me," answered his guide, and he led the way to the door through which he had disappeared when he went to seek the knife. The seal catcher followed him, and there, in a smaller room, he found a great brown seal lying on a bed of pale pink seaweed, with a gaping wound in his side. "That is my father," said his guide, "whom thou wounded this morning, thinking that he was one of the common seals who live in the sea, instead of a merman who hath speech and understanding as you mortals have. I brought thee hither to bind up his wounds, for no other hand than thine can heal him." "I have no skill in the art of healing," said the seal catcher, astonished at the forbearance of these strange creatures, whom he had so unwittingly wronged. "But I will bind up the wound to the best of my power, and I am only sorry that it was my hands that caused it." He went over to the bed, and stooping over the wounded merman, washed and dressed the hurt as well as he could, and the touch of his hands appeared to work like magic, for no sooner had he finished than the wound seemed to deaden and die, leaving only the scar, and the old seal sprang up as well as ever. Then there was a great rejoicing throughout the whole palace of the seals. They laughed, and they talked, and they embraced each other in their own strange way, crowding round their comrade and rubbing their noses against his, as if to show him how delighted they were at his recovery. But all this while the seal catcher stood alone in the corner, with his mind filled with dark thoughts, for although he saw now that they had no intention of killing him, he did not relish the prospect of spending the rest of his life in the guise of a seal, fathoms deep under the ocean. But presently, to his great joy, his guide approached him and said, "Now you are at liberty to return home to your wife and children. I will take you to them, but only on one condition." "And what is that?" asked the seal catcher eagerly, overjoyed at the prospect of being restored safely to the upper world and to his family. "That you will take a solemn oath never to wound a seal again." "That I will do right gladly," he replied, for although the promise meant giving up his means of livelihood, he felt that if only he regained his proper shape, he could always turn his hand to something else. So he took the required oath with all due solemnity, holding up his fin as he swore, and all the other seals crowded round him as witnesses, and a sigh of relief went through the halls when the words were spoken, for he was the most noted seal catcher in the north. Then he bade the strange company farewell, and accompanied by his guide, passed once more through the outer doors of coral, and up and up and up through the shadowy green water, until it began to grow lighter and lighter, and at last they emerged into the sunshine of earth. Then, with one spring, they reached the top of the cliff, where the black horse was waiting for them, quietly nibbling on green turf. When they left the water, their strange disguise dropped from them, and they were now, as they had been before, a plain seal catcher and a tall, well-dressed gentleman in riding clothes. "Get up behind me," said the latter, as he swung himself into his saddle. The seal catcher did as he was bid, taking tight hold of his companion's coat, for he remembered how nearly he had fallen off on his previous journey. Then it all happened as it happened before. The bridle was shaken, and the horse galloped off, and it was not long before the seal catcher found himself standing in safety before his own garden gate. He held out his hand to say goodbye, but as he did so, the stranger pulled out a huge bag of gold and placed in it. "Thou hast done thy part of the bargain. We must do ours," he said. "Men shall never say that we took away an honest man's work without making reparation for it. And here is what will keep thee in comfort to thy life's end." Then he vanished, and when the astonished seal catcher carried the bag into his cottage and turned the gold out on the table, he found that what the stranger had said was true, and that he would be a rich man for the remainder of his days. So, when taking oaths, you should take them in full sincerity. And regardless of the other side keeping their part of the bargain or not, it's still good and right to follow what you swear and pledge to do. So, I hope you really enjoyed episode 21 of Wicked Shizuku's Reviews. You can find me at wickedshizuku@gmail.com. You can visit my Telegram channel at wickedshizuku's reviews at t.me/wickedshizuku's reviews. You can DM me at Twitter at samlyntoll. And you can also find my archived poetry and book reviews at Samantha Tollison at substack.com. See you next time. Thanks for watching.